Greetings and salutations, men, women, and whatever the hell Violet is, and welcome to Fair Game. I'm your host, Jaimas, and we got a rather interesting entry for you today. For a lot of people, pretty much regardless of console, there's going to be a couple of games that come out that by all accounts are not very good. They may even be bad, but for whatever insane reason, you enjoy them anyway. Megaman Soccer is that way for me. I actually remember first reading about this game in GamePro back in the early 90s, and it getting a fairly mediocre at best score. It got pretty lambasted by critics at the time, and I can kind of see why. Megaman Soccer is a game that holds absolutely nothing back, except for the budget. And good God is that on display with every frame of this game. From the slipshot translation, to the number of major problems, to the not including the goddamn ending in the game, well, Megaman Soccer's got some issues, to say the least. The AI pinballs between Genius Level and Mario Retardy, often within seconds of one another, on the same team. Parts of the AI are hilariously exploitable, allowing you to reliably get shots in on the net from certain angles depending on which character you're using at the given time. The story is as absolutely generic as you can possibly get given the circumstances. And yet, despite all of it, the game is charming. It's a Mega Man Soccer game, and an actually okay one. Even in spite of the bugs, even in spite of the problems, even in spite of the basically no budget, it's an okay game. Now, while it is not my favorite soccer game of its type, that award goes to Nintendo World Cup, Mega Man Soccer holds a unique place in that, much like it is for Neil, it's a game I routinely go back to and play through, despite the fact that it's decades old. How it implements the Mega Man formula is actually rather intriguing. In the main campaign mode, which we are playing through now, you start off with a team entirely of Mega Man. As you beat the other teams, each time you beat one, you will get a robot from that team. So by beating Skullman's team here, we will get a Skullman of our own to add to our team. And this continues until you've beaten all 8 of the original Robot Masters and get one for each position. After this, you have the equivalent of the Wily Castle stages in soccer format, where you fight 2 mini-boss teams, getting 2 extra players from those, before you take on Wily in what's supposed to be the last stage. In addition to the Robot Masters from the campaign mode, there are additional Robot Masters you can also use in multiplayer, and also in tournament mode. Counting Mega Man, there's 21 different players in the game you can potentially use, featuring a motley assortment of Robot Masters from Mega Man 1 through 4. There's even one from Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge, which kinda caught me by surprise. The various players in the game all have different stats. Some are faster, some are better at tackling, some are better at stealing, some are better at resisting being stolen from, and so on. Each player also has their own unique super shot. Most of the time, these cause the ball to go flying at the net full tilt with the potential of either taking out or knocking out of the way anyone who gets in its way, potentially even blasting the goalie out of the way and scoring an automatic goal. However, by default, you only get 2 of these per match, so you gotta use them sparingly. On top of this, certain characters can completely stop certain super shots, but are very vulnerable to others. For example, Mega Man will pretty much always stop Toadman or Flashman's special. Meanwhile, Skullman here can't stop Dustman's shot to save his life. There's a lot of variety involved with this game, and that's one of the things that makes it so much fun to play. Skullman here, for example, statistically is basically a clone of Mega Man, but in practice he has a slightly larger hitbox when tackling, which makes him play a little bit differently. It also makes him slightly easier to steal from. And right about there, you're going to see one of the shot methods that you can use to reliably score in action. This one works for Mega Man and many of the faster characters. Some of the slower ones require a slightly more involved way of getting the shot in. Basically, if you shoot up or down from here from a long enough distance, the goalie will not be able to compensate in time, and you'll usually reliably be able to get the shot in. The thing is, this really only works if the goalie is set to automatic, and it often doesn't work too well against players. The reason why is that the player can control their characters even if they don't make logical sense to put them in a certain place, which makes it much easier to stop just by moving them in the way. It also means that if you set your goalie to manual, you can just move the goalie yourself and deal with it that way. The 2 other ways to score usually involve passing rapidly in order to get a shot in at the goal, or repeatedly firing hard shots directly at the goalie in the hopes of smacking him aside hard enough for you to get in a shot with another player. I'm kind of old hat at this, so for the most part, I shouldn't have any problem beating Skullman in this one. Interestingly, despite the fact that he's basically a Mega Man clone stat-wise, I think he's probably one of my favorite players in this game. Fittingly, Skullman's super shot is the skull barrier, weaponized in such a way that it wraps around the ball, and whoever's hit by it gets trapped by the skull barrier. As I recall, Pharaohman is the one who's actually vulnerable to it. Megaman's super shot is, of course, the Mega Buster. It hits neutrally on most goalies. If I remember correctly, there's a few that are always vulnerable to it, though. Goalies will react to a super shot one of three ways. They're either immune to it and will catch any ball that happens to be super shotted in that fashion immediately. They can be vulnerable to it, in which case they can never catch that ball. Or it can be neutral and there's a chance that they'll catch the ball. One thing that this game does have a little bit of an issue with is that there's only 12 different stages for you to play on, which really isn't much. Probably my biggest issue with the game is that it drags in terms of actual speed. Like, you hardly feel it when you're actually playing the game, but then you come back later on and then you see that you just spent like 16 minutes running around a field kicking a ball in the air, which is probably actually the biggest problem with Mega Man Soccer. 90 to 95% of it is going to be spent trying to get the ball either towards the net or away from the net. Now at this point, the casual observer may go, but Jaimas, what the hell is the problem with that? I thought the whole point of this was that you were playing soccer after all. Well, yeah, but there are other soccer games that don't have this problem nearly as badly. Like, for example, take Nintendo World Cup. While that is a soccer game, there's a lot more involved than just running around. And because the player only controls one character on the field and gives orders to their teammates, as opposed to actively controlling the rest, it actually gives a lot more flow and a lot more standardization to how the game plays. It makes it feel much faster than Mega Man Soccer's gameplay feels. Actually, Nintendo World Cup does a lot that Mega Man Soccer does better despite being an 8-bit game. I think it boils down to options. Nintendo World Cup gives you so many things you do while in the field that it kind of makes Mega Man Soccer feel kind of Spartan by contrast. Which I suppose is to be expected, considering it is technically a Kunio-kun game, and it offers the fact that you can quite literally kill the enemy players. I'd love to see where in the rules that's allowed. I'm not exaggerating or joking about that one, by the way. In Nintendo World Cup, if you successfully deplete a character's stamina completely during a match, the next hit that they take will immediately KO them for the rest of the play. They will not get back up until the play ends, and only then they'll be back on their feet, but with 0 stamina, so they can just be knocked right down again. In Mega Man Soccer, this isn't the case. A super shot will just take you out of the fight for a couple of seconds, and it's really not a big hindrance. However, super shots being able to just blast the goalie out of the way are so important that you really have to be careful with them. You don't want that shot hitting some random player beforehand, and if you are that random player, you want to make sure that the enemy super shots are hitting your players before they get to the goal. Anytime the comp screws up a super shot and it nails one of your players before getting to the goal, that's a win for you. That just made it easier. One of the reasons that the game takes so long is that whenever there's some kind of penalty shot, or the goalie gets the ball or whatever, the timer freezes. Now that does happen in other soccer games. I know it happens in Nintendo World Cup, and it definitely happens in quite a few others that I've played. But because Mega Man Soccer has a relatively slow timer in the first place, it just makes it that much more so. Interestingly, there is actually a ROM patch for Mega Man Soccer that, among other things, enables you to properly see the ending, as well as play as Wily in exhibition mode. So you may be wondering, why am I not playing that? Well, apparently whoever programmed it decided to do something a little sneaky during that programming session, because they kind of broke something by accident. Basically, they made it so that any character with 40 speed now has 55. For the record, 40 is the average speed in the game. It's the one that Mega Man, Toad Man, Snake Man have, etc. Wily, the fastest character in the game, has a speed of 50. As such, this basically trivializes the one-player mode of the game, since it turns Mega Man and Skullman into these absolute destroyers of worlds. It also means that slower characters like Pharaohman, Dustman, and of course Woodman are basically unplayable. So as much as I'd like to see the ending in this, I'm going to play this one by ear, and I'm going to see if I can do a little code finagling in order to make it so that we can enable the ending on our own without having to use the patch. I figure, what the hell, I'm not too proud to try it. Besides, if I can't grease monkey my way through this, then what the hell else am I going to do to make this entertaining while I'm trying to? We just switched sides, so we're finally in the closing half of this, at least. I like to think that somewhere, in an alternate universe, there's a place where this game really took off and got sequels. A new Megaman soccer game with improved mechanics and basically every Robot Master from the previous games? Hell yeah, I'd play that. What Robot Master would you like to see playable in such a situation? All cards on the table for Mega Man Classic Series. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Ha! Corner Shot claims another victim. You know what's the damnedest thing? I can never play this game without thinking of the Wily Show shorts from Newgrounds back in the 1990s. If you ever have the chance, go look up the HD collection of them on YouTube sometime. It's actually kind of surprising how many of the old jokes still hold up to some degree. Almost Python-esque now that I stop and think about it. My favorite one of all of them is the one where Skullman is secretly revealed to also be Freeze-Man. Focusing more on the game in question, one of the things that does kind of annoy me a little bit is that the comp is allowed to cheat a little bit more than the player is. Probably the single most common case of this happening in action is the fact that the comp can tackle even before you have the ball, and the reverse generally is not true. While I'm not 100% on what causes that, they seem to be able to do it with just about every character too. It actually makes some of the defensive team members like Dustman, Pharaohman, and Woodman a little bit more threatening because of it, since they can technically smack you even before you actually get the ball, ergo increasing the odds that they'll get it and get it away from you. An interesting side note is that Neil and I actually made an actual tournament rule set for this game where different players have different points values to encourage you to start playing around with various options with your teams. We had it so that at the time, Flashman and Topman would offer you anti-points, which you could use to then buy better players, because they have built-in handicaps. Nowadays, I think we might actually add Woodman to that list, simply because even though he's very powerful, he's just that slow. As I recall from our rules set, most players didn't cost anything. Fireman, Cutman, and Gemini Man all cost 1 point each. Anchor, Proto-Man, and Iceman all cost 2 points each. And if he's somehow available at all, Wily costs 3 points. To field one of these points-costed players, you'd have to field a certain number of Topman, Woodman, or Flashman. For example, if you wanted to field a Cutman in your team, you would have to field 1 Flashman, Topman, or Woodman. If you wanted 2 Firemen, then you'd have to include 2 of them. The higher point cost characters work the same way. For example, if you want to include an Anchor, you'd have to include 2 Flashman, Topman, or Woodman. A really interesting quirk about this particular rule set is that it makes it impossible for a team to field more than 5 points worth of characters. The absolute most you can do is have 1 Wily and 1 2-point character, with everyone else being penalty characters in response. Using this method, you could also field up to 2 2-point characters or up to 3 1-point characters. Interesting notes, the reason why Gemini Man is a 1-pointer is because, despite his incredibly high speed, his super shot sucks and his stats other than speed are kinda crap. Iceman has 2 points as opposed to 1 because he's actually got a really well-rounded stat set as well as a really powerful super shot. Anchor is a 2-pointer just because of how good a goalie he is. Overall, the rule set was pretty good, and who knows, Neil and I may simulcast a match or 2 using it at some point or another. It's been, what, a decade and a half since the last time we've done that? Christ, I just realized Neil and I haven't played games in forever. One of the weirder quirks about Mega Man Soccer is one you're going to see periodically, namely that if you try to use the long-range pass and you don't hit a specific direction, the AI will become confused and just fire it in any direction that it feels like. That can include your own goal, and yes, it is actually possible to score on yourself in this game. I've seen it happen. Many times. I've even seen the comp do it. I'm actually kind of hoping we do get to see that during this run, because the comp will occasionally do stuff like that, or accidentally pass to your guys. For some reason. It just happens. At some point or another, I just need to make a Dustman version of the King Crimson meme with "It just works." Wow, that one was really close. You can really get to see an example of how bad the AI can screw up when it comes to the goalie at times if you're not careful. That's actually one of the reasons it's SOP to get really good with the goalie in multiplayer mode by playing around with manual. Helps prevent situations like that one from taking place. For some reason, the long-range passes will just gradually gravitate towards a player in that general area, even if there's not actually one there, based on the fact that they're supposed to be there. When that happens, I like to pretend that the Robot Masters are having a blue screen of death or some other spurg out. And speaking of embarrassments, are you guys familiar with Cutsman? Or as Violet likes to call him, Deadly Cutsman, in all capital letters? It's something from Captain N that immediately became a meme amongst my friends, but basically it goes like this. One of the Captain N episodes centered around Mega Man 1, and unfortunately, Captain N at the time had an animation team on it that had no idea what any of these video games were actually about. So the writers would give them information on what a character looked like, and then the artist would try to do it. Bless them for trying, really. But the result would almost invariably so bad it's awesome character designs, and none were quite as hilarious as Cutsman. Cutsman was basically a green Cutman with a purple humanoid face and gold scissors on his head. It's exactly as hilarious as it sounds. I bring this up because much earlier in the week, I was doing this thing where I was testing the various color palettes in Megaman Soccer to see what character put in the goalkeeping position resulted in what team color. One of the teams, I think it was Toadman's, made it so that if you put Cutman in the goalie position, he looked almost exactly like Cutsman. And I was laughing like an idiot for far longer than I'm comfortable admitting. You know, looking back on it, I think one of the best scores I've ever seen in this game actually was one time Neil was playing. He had a team of almost entirely elect men, and I remember specifically he scored like 15-4. It was pretty amazing. I don't know if Mercenary Cobra 1's ever been all that big on this game. I mean, I'm sure he's played it at some point. Dude's played damn near everything at some point or another. Granted, he's got a talent for finding games I've never even heard of nor would touch. I don't know, with enough of a crash course, I think just about anybody could enjoy this game. I remember a kid I used to babysit for really loved this game. Kinda made sense, though, because he was such a huge fan of Proto Man. He loved Scott McNeil's portrayal of him in the Ruby Spears cartoon. Oh my god. Then again, at no point can I ever say I ever expected Proto Man to take a shot at a statue of Abraham Lincoln, leading Mega Man to jump in front of it to try to save the statue. Yes, that actually happened. Go look it up. It's hilarious. So we're almost out of time, and an interesting quirk about that in this game is that the comp will always try to make a last-second shot. Since we scored so much better than Skullman, we get one of Skullman's players for our team. But not for something unintentionally hilarious. Are you ready? Look at that goddamn password grid. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. See you next episode.